What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh video and back with another zombie format video. I've been really enjoying this format so far. Held in the SJC Durham of 2007, October 2007, using the September 2007 ban list and going up to Tactical Evolution as the last new booster set, and it's been really fun. You know, we've explored Zombie, we've explored Perfect Circle Monarch, both of which are very good decks in the format. Perfect Circle Monarch is probably the deck that people view as the best deck in the format right now, just like it is in Perfect Circle format, which is the next format, which doesn't change too much there. So, you know, people think that it will port back here pretty well. It seems like that is indeed largely the case, but when you know a deck like Perfect Circle Monarch is going to be the best deck in the room, or at least what people view as the best deck in the room, then you can bring something like this deck that Alpha 2 brought to the last zombie format tournament that happened most recently, and actually managed to win the whole thing. This is a macro stun style deck. It's not really like stun, it's more just playing Dimensional Fisher and, you know, just banishing your opponent's stuff, so that way they can't recur things like Disc Commander, they can't use Treeborn Frog, and also against a zombie deck, for instance, as well, they can't really revive all their zombies either because they won't hit the grave. So this deck is really, really good against a lot of decks in the metagame right now. Graveyard shenanigans are all over the place no matter what deck you play. And so this deck can really capitalize on that and win pretty distinctively. So let's go through the card by card here. Now, again, this was Alpha 2's build, so I don't have intimate knowledge of everything in this list, but I think I have played with the deck enough to know why certain cards are in here. Maybe not at every ratio here, but hopefully we can sort of give a good enough breakdown to give you an idea of what this deck's trying to do. So firstly, we got 2 Banish for the Radiance and triple Dim Fuse. Very, very important for this deck because it wants to really be banishing your opponent's stuff. And that is really an interesting distinction here because a lot of sort of macro or dim fizz decks are, you know, playing these cards and they're also playing a big package of things like DD Survivor, which is, you know, a great resource for when you have the banisher or the dim fuse up because it's very, very hard to clear because this thing comes back to your field during every one of your end phases here. However, if you do that, you could potentially brick on the survivors when you don't have the fishers and stuff like that. So I actually really like what Alpha 2 did here, just playing 1 DD survivor that you can search out for Rhoda if you really need it. But really the power of this deck is not in DD survivor shenanigans. The power of this deck is in shutting off anything your opponent's deck can do. So I do like this choice of really cutting down on the cards that you're playing that can take advantage of this stuff and really focusing on just hurting what your opponent's doing. So we've also got DD Assailant and DD Warrior Lady to banish more stuff. Of course, Assailant isn't going to banish something like a Frog or a Disc Commander, but it can banish your opponent's big threats, which is pretty good. And DD Warrior Lady, of course, is an all-star in this deck. If you know your opponent has Treeborn or Disc Commander or something like that, you can banish that thing. We've also got Break with the Magic Warrior to deal with our opponent's back row and also just be a big body. Cyber Dragon to be a big body. We've got Neos Alias to pair with the Stratos and the Wild Heart here. So this is our hero package. And Alias is actually a really good inclusion for Tactical Evolution. It's just a big guy, but sometimes you need a big guy. A deck like this, and this is why I sort of push back on the idea that it's stun, because it does get pretty aggressive. You're trying to hit into your opponent every turn and kill them before they can actually find a way to get rid of your dim fuse and turn back their own strategies online. So Stratos for Alias is actually a very, very good play in this deck. And also, if you know your opponent has a lot of back row, then Stratos for Wildheart is also very good because Wildheart can withstand any traps that your opponent might have, and sometimes Wildheart on its own with some protective traps of your own can be enough to just win the game on the spot. We've also got Exiled Force as our last card here, last Rhoda search, and a great way to clear your opponent's monsters. For the spells, we got Book of Moon, very, very versatile card in this format, and also compare with our knock in the deck as well. We got Triple Dim Fizz because we do want to see this. If we brick on multiples, that is unfortunate, but this thing is really good against a lot of decks in the metagame, and if they can't have an out to it, then you can potentially just win the game on the back of this card alone. We got Double E-Call to search out our Stratos, or if Stratos is already used up, an Alias or a Wild Heart. We've got a Fisher here to deal with your opponent's monsters. We've got a Heavy Storm to deal with their back row. This can conflict occasionally with Dim Fizz, but if you've got Dim Fizz up, you shouldn't really need to use Heavy Storm. And if you are really worried about back row, you can always go into Wild Heart and, you know, beat him with this. We've got a Lightning Vortex to wipe out our opponent's field. We've got an MST to deal with their back row, a Knock, as I mentioned. We've got double Reinforcement of the Army to search out any warrior that we need in our deck. The only cards that we play are not warriors are the Banishers, the Breaker, and the Sidra. Everything else can be searched off Rhoda, so it's a very, very useful card in this deck. We've got a Shrink in case we need to win by battle. This can actually come up. We got a Smashing Ground, just like the Fisher, to clear our opponent's stuff. We got double Bottomless here to deal with their monsters. We've got a Dark Bribe along with Triple Solemn to protect our Dim Fuses and just prevent our opponent from doing a variety of plays. If you're playing the Dim Fuses and that's up, then your opponent will likely be locked out of a lot of plays anyway. So if you can shut down the plays that they do still have, you can be in a very, very good spot. We got a Dust Tornado to deal with their back row. We've got a Mirror Force to deal with their monster attacking in along with Double Saku. And we got a TT to blow up the board. Lastly, we got a Dust Shoot to spin things back to their deck. For the side deck, we've got a variety of things here. We've got Amethyst Archer mainly for burn, I'm pretty sure. We got Double Cypher Soldier for warrior-based decks. We've got a side right here to get a bit more aggressive. We're going second. We've got Double Spy here to get a bit more defensive. We've got a Mobius to deal with back row heavy decks, along with Double Dust Tornado as well. We've got a Morphing Jar to dig deeper into our deck if we need it, and we know our opponent will not be getting too much value off this. We've got a Snipe Hunter to deal with like just problematic boards. I'm not sure exactly when you'd bring in Snipe Hunter specifically, but maybe against more back row heavy decks or stall decks. We've got a Spirit Reaper to rip a card out of our opponent's hand or just get defensive if we need it. We've got a Brain Con if we bring in the Mobius, this can be good, but it can also be good if we need to get a bit more aggressive. We've got a Nox to deal with their sets. We've got Double Dust Tornado to deal with back row, and we got a Return from a Different Dimension for a surprising OTK push if you manage to set up Dim Fizz and things like that. This can also be good in the mirror match as well, because if they get their Dim Fizz up, then, you know, it's more likely that you'll have cards banished to use return. Fusion deck here is just a hodgepodge of cards that I put in. It doesn't really matter because this deck did not go into that. But that's going to do it for the deck breakdown. Let's dive into some games and see how the deck actually plays. Okay, we got a game here against KC 2000, who has appeared on the channel before. Always a pleasure to have them on. And we're going to be diving into the games here. Now, if you like this sort of content featuring retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Gameplay, then definitely subscribe to the channel because I got a lot more of this stuff coming. And if you want to play games in this format or any other format that I feature on the channel, then definitely head over to the YGO from Zero Discord server. That's where I actually source these games from. But we open up a pretty good hand here. We draw DD Assailant, which is a perfect first turn set. We can just set that in case they go Sidra attack in or something. There's argument not to set this because it does turn on Sidra, which can then go into a Monarch here, which can be a bit awkward for us. Especially when we don't have a thing to stop actually a Monarch itself. We just have Dark Bribe here, which can only stop spell traps. So if they go like Sidra into Mobius, pop our back row, that's a bit unfortunate. But if they don't do that, I still feel okay. Because I feel like most people are not playing Zaborg. If they go into Ryza and spin back our Dim Fizz or something, I'm fine with that because we have Rhoda to get another warrior. So I think overall, while this does have its risks, I do think it ultimately is a fine play. But there is the argument for holding the DD Assailant to not turn on their side res into a Monarch right away, and then we could potentially bring it out next turn. But I'm fine doing this and just passing back to them, seeing what they do. They're going to bring out a Neos Alias here, so it seems like they're on a hero deck as well. Maybe it's a mirror match. We'll have to find out. But they're going to attack over our Assailant and get that banished. So now we've got this Rhoda here. We draw into Mirror Force, which is really good because it gives us a bit of protection here. And since we have Dim Fuse up, we're just going to bring out a Survivor here and try and get in with this. Survivor can solo on its own if you've got Dim Fizz up. So we're going to go for that. We don't set the Mirror Force because if they've got Heavy, I don't necessarily want to Dark Bribe that and give them another card that gives them tools to get over our Dim Fizz. So I'd rather just leave the board like this. If they do Heavy and then bring out another monster to hit over Survivor, we can then Fisher or Smashing it and then set Mirror Force in the following turn to deal with later threats. But if they do manage to clear the Dim Fuse either way, then Survivor has lost a lot of value. So I do feel like this is fine. Just leaving the Survivor here. They're going to go for Stratos, search out Mally. Unfortunately, that Mally will be dead for them, and this does confirm that this is not a mirror, so I can feel a bit better about that. They're going to set one, pass back to us, because they know that, attacking into the Survivor is kind of pointless here. So they're going to just attack into the Stratos, or we're going to attack into the Stratos here with the Survivor, because we want to just, like, either bait out a back row or get rid of the Stratos. Either way should work out well for us. And they're going to go for Econ here, switching our Survivor to defense. We could have gone for MST, popped the back row, and then gone in with Survivor, but I don't really think that would have been worth it. Because again, Survivor does trade with a card either way here. And if it is something that stops the Survivor from getting in over the Stratos, we do have Fisher and Smashing, so we can just use that to get rid of the Stratos in main too, which is what we are going to do. We want to just keep them off of any monsters that they have, just in case they have a Monarch that can deal with our board. So I do think it's good just to go for Fisher there. But they're going to go for E-Call here, searching out another Alias. So this is just deck thinning for them, I think, at this point. They're going to go for the Alias, attack over the Survivor, I guess just because, might as well. They're going to set one, pass back to us, Survivor comes back, and then we are going to draw Trap Dust Shoot, which is really, really good here. We're going to Smashing that Alias and then get in for 18, and now Dust Shoot can provide us with a way to spin a card back from their hand. So I feel very good about this. We also get an idea of what they're playing, so this will inform us in siding as well. And we get to see what they've got going on here. So Oh wait, no, we don't. So they admitted defeat here. Actually, I forgot about that. I mixed it up with a later game, so we actually didn't get to see the spice there. But I did click show both here, so you might have seen a bit of spice there in that hand that we might see in game 2. But I'll talk about it when it comes up in game 2 here. But yeah, I mean, this deck can just be absolutely brutal against decks that really do, want to, abuse their graveyard and get a lot of value off of it, which is a lot of decks in this format. So hopefully that game 1 showed how powerful Dim Fuse can be. This game 2 might not, though, because they do get to de-draw Pitch of Mally right away. So that's pretty good for them. They go for Banish Mally into Mally here, which to me says that they probably have Crush Card Virus, which is a bit unfortunate. They're also going to go for Card Trooper here. So maybe they just wanted to get mills and not mill the second Mally. That's a possibility as well. But I do think it is very likely that back row is a Crush card, and it is indeed the Crush card, tributing that Mally and getting rid of our Banisher and our Alias. It's a bit unfortunate. Banisher would have been very good here. But I think ultimately we still have a decent hand. We can go for Rhoda here and search out a Stratos, just get some value, get another guy that is not going to be crush carded here. So we're going to search out a Wild Heart because we do have TT and Mirror Force in hand. So if we decide to set the TT with the Wild Heart, then that's going to be a good combo for us. And I do decide ultimately just to attack over the Card Trooper because we don't have a way to get rid of it without having them draw anyways. So I figure we might as well just attack over it. And then we'll set 3 because if they've got heavy, we probably lose here either way. They know all of our back row anyways, so if they heavy and hit some, then they'll know what the other is, and so they'll know, okay, I just have to play around this card here. So we don't have really a great option here when they know our entire hand with Crush card, but I do think this is the best option because also, it's less information total if they've got just like an MST or something that they want to use to blind snipe one of these. So I feel like it's fine just going for that. They bring out a Survivor of their own. Very interesting tech card against this deck in siding. I do like that a lot. And they're just going to crash in with our Stratos, set 3 of their own, pass back to us. I mean, this is pretty good for that Wild Heart. Now, we do make an error here. I should be showing them what I draw off Crush card, but I forget to do that. But it ultimately does not affect the outcome of this duel. I mean, maybe it will because they don't know that we have the Cypher Soldier in hand, and maybe that will affect things. This Assailant would be dead here. So, that would be engrave. But again, it did not actually come up here. So, yeah, just a bit unfortunate that we forgot to do this, but this would be the last turn on Crush card. Assailant would be the last card seen, and that would be in graveyard right now. And I still would have done the same thing, just going for Cypher Soldier, getting in for damage, because at this point, I think it is better just going for damage. We've got protective cards here in the back row, so I feel like we can, just do this and be fine. But they're going to search out a Stratos with that Rhoda, go for Disc Commander there. And that makes me a bit worried because they might have a way to set that up. They do have D-Draw to pitch the Disc Commander, draw 2. It's not looking too good for us. They do have Premat here. They know about the MST, but I do think it made sense to go for the Premat there because they got to bait it out eventually. And this does narrow down their options for what the other 2 back row are here. So if they're going to blind snipe a back row, like try and hit the Mirror Force, they can hit into the Wild Heart. Then now is the time to potentially do it. And it looks like they are indeed going to do that. And they do indeed hit the Mirror Force. So that's pretty good for them. They'll be able to attack into the Wild Heart here, but we are threatening lethal with this Cypher Soldier. They do call the Haunted to bring back an Alias here, which is a bit interesting until they go for Symbols of Duty. So this is the spice that was in their hand last game that they didn't want us to see. They get to send a normal monster that they control, including Alias, because it does count as a normal monster there. And they get to special summon 1 card from either player's graveyard. That's a pretty busted effect, so I might be trying to experiment with Symbols of Duty on my own later on in my coverage of this format, because it actually is an interesting use of it, sending that Alias and then getting the Disc Commander back. You also don't have to summon it in attack mode, you just get to special summon it. And so this will be able to draw them 2 more cards, hopefully drawing into a way for them to deal with Cypher Soldier. But they're just going to set 1 pass back to us. If they have a way to deal with Cypher Soldier, they have a way to deal with Cypher Soldier. I think it's just best to attack in here. You could argue, so if the Assailant was gone, maybe I wouldn't have done this because, Assailant gives me backup. If they do have a way to deal with Cypher Soldier, then I can just set Assailant here. Whereas if I didn't have Assailant, maybe it would have been better to switch Cypher Soldier to defense mode, set the Solemn, and then go for an attack next turn when I have Solemn as backup. But I do have TT set here. So even if, I didn't have Assailant here, I do have a backup here. And of course they know about TT, and they do play Raigeki Break, so maybe they got another one of those. But if they got a Raigeki Break in the back row, they're probably going to hit the Cypher Soldier. And so I feel like TT here will likely survive a turn, even if Cypher Soldier's gone. So I feel like it is just better to go for the lethal push now and bait out a card. We still have TT. We have Solemn as well now as backup. So I feel like we're in a good spot overall, even if we don't have the Assailant. But either way, this is a lethal push. We're going to go for it, and that will indeed go through. So looks like they're trying to draw into a way to deal with this board, but unfortunately they did not do it, just having an Avarice and an MST as the set bluffs. And yeah, unfortunately that's 4 cards engraved, not 5, so they won't be able to use the Avarice there. So that is kind of a rough spot for them to be in for sure. But yeah, very, very cool stuff here overall. Also playing Doomlord, that's very interesting inclusion there. Yeah, very, very cool stuff overall from them. And I definitely will be experimenting with Symbols of Duty in the future. But I think this matchup is really good at showing what this deck can do against decks that really do rely on the graveyard. Because if you look at a Symbols of Duty deck, that is going to rely on your graveyard a lot. And so this deck is very, very good at dismantling that. But this one, the only match I got with the deck. Let's dive into another one now. Okay, we got another game here against Jaina Fett, who I don't think is a frequent guest on the channel. So they've appeared on the channel in the past, I think. But I'm not sure if they've appeared more than once or just once. But either way, happy to have them on. It was a pleasure having them on last time, I believe. Because I do think they were on at least once. But anyways, we're going to dive into the games here. They're going to go for Rhoda for Stratos. That's a pretty good start. And they're going to search out a Mali here. So, this could be similar to the deck that Casey was on as well. But I doubt they're on Symbols of Duty type because I haven't seen that around. And that was a very, very cool brew there. So this is probably more of a standard sort of like Perfect Circle Monarch deck, I'd assume. But this is a pretty great start for us. We have a lot of different options here. We could just set Assailant. We could also go for E-Call for a Stratos of our own, then crash our Stratos into their Stratos. We could go for Breaker, hit over Stratos, then pop the back row main 2. A lot of different options for us here. What we decided to do ultimately is just set the Assailant, set a Dust Tornado, and set a Solemn. Because I don't really feel like we need to get aggressive with the Stratos now, especially if that back row is something that can deal with our monster attacking in. We don't have any defense to protect our own life points. So I don't necessarily want to, just get aggressive, lose to a back row, and then give them the aggressive initiative. So what I'd rather do is set this Assailant here. If they bring out like a Riser or something, that is a bit unfortunate. They can spin back the Assailant, get in for 24, but then we draw into the Assailant next turn, so we can just reset it, or just crash it in ourselves, because we got this Dust Tornado to deal with their back row. So I feel like there's a lot of different ways for us to proceed from here in a way that is pretty good. So we'll have to see what they do. If they've got knock, then we get hard punished on this. But I do think it is best just to go for this. They attack over it with the Stratos, and that will get banished there. They set 1, pass back to us. We draw Banisher, which is really good. Now that we have Banisher online, I am just going to go for Dust Tornado. I could get blown out by a set MST or Dust Tornado of their own, getting rid of our Solemn. That would be unfortunate, but I do think it is valuable, given that they probably are on a graveyard-focused deck since they're playing Mali, to then get out the Banisher and try and hit over that monster. We're going to hit that back row. It's a pulling the rug, so I'm very glad I didn't go for E-Call for Stratos last turn. We're going to go for the Banisher here and attack over their set, and it's a Treeborn Frog, so that is very likely that they are on Monarchs, because that is the deck that plays Treeborn Frog. So they're going to bring out a DD Warrior Lady here, attack into our Banisher, and that will clear the Banisher. So, it's a bit unfortunate for us, but we do have the aggressive initiative now, so I do feel pretty good about this. Next turn, we can go for E-Call for Stratos and then get in for a fair bit of damage while searching something else out. Although we do draw Bottomless here, so what I'm going to decide to do instead is just go for Wild Heart, attack in for 15, and then set the Bottomless, because Bottomless does protect the Wild Heart here. So I figure it's a pretty good deal for us. And then we can go for E-Call for Stratos next turn, search out Alias if we want to, and get crazy like that. So we are going to indeed go for E-Call for Stratos. We do know about pulling, so we could get pulling here, but if they do pulling, that's a 1-for-1 trade, and we are okay taking that trade. So we're going to go for Stratos here, and we're going to search, and we're going to grab an Alias. We could also have popped the back row with the Stratos, but I do think it's better just to search, especially since we have Lightning Vortex here, which does require us to have a fair amount of cards in hand to actually be useful. So I do feel like it's good getting a card in hand just to increase our hand size here for the Vortex. We're attacking the set with the Stratos. I mean, I probably could have attacked in with the Wild Heart, because I don't know what the Stratos could clear. The Wild Heart couldn't, besides DD Warrior Lady, and that's gone. So I don't really think I needed to do this, but I do it anyways, and I run into a Reaper, so it didn't matter either way. But I think in hindsight, I probably should have attacked in with the Wild Heart instead of the Stratos. We think about this a bit, and since they're probably on a Monarch deck, we do just go for Vortex here, pitching the Alias, popping that Reaper, and hoping that this is enough to cut them off from some things. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw into a Banisher, so we're going to go for that Banisher, just get another way to banish things on field online. And they're going to think about this, and they're going to ultimately TT this. This is a very interesting choice. We could go for a Solemn here if we want to, because this means that they probably have a monster they want to get in grave here. But ultimately, if that monster that's set is something that can wall us off, which, Reaper was something that could wall us off, they probably have other things in deck that could wall us off. ultimately, I am a bit afraid of just Soloming and then leaving them with a wall that they can then tribute over for a Monarch and get really crazy with. So what I'm going to decide to do here instead is I've got the Bottomless, so if they do bring in another monster to get over the Wild Heart, I can Bottomless that. So I am actually fine letting this go through, even though it has been unfortunate for us. Ultimately, it is a 2-for-2 trade, so it's not the worst for us, and that was a guard, so I'm very glad I did that. We're going to attack in for 15 there, and then pass back to them. And again, I feel pretty safe here. They go for Soul Exchange. I think in hindsight, I could have even Solemn Judgmented this because it is probably good just to prevent them from bringing out a Monarch here. But we do have Bottomless to deal with that Monarch and then Breaker to attack in. So I don't necessarily think it's the worst thing in the world to let the Soul Exchange go through and save the Solemn for later. But there is an argument to be made for that. So they spin back our Solemn. They do get the correct choice there, which they probably could have had the read that we had a Solemn set there or something that wasn't chainable to the Ryza summon. So, because we probably would have Bottomless the DD Worley when it came down earlier for the Banisher. So, yeah, I think it made sense for them to pop that one. And we'll set this Solemn here, pass back to them. And this is still a formidable board, all things considered, but it is a bit rough. We set one just in case they got Morphing Jar there. I doubt it is, but we were going to set the TT in the main phase 2 anyway, so we might as well just set it now. Doesn't really change anything here. Unless it's like Green Kappa specifically as a flip monster, but that is not something that people are going to be playing. They're going to set one, pass back to us, and we draw Smashing, which could be pretty good if they do have a wall here. We're not going to set the Smashing here, so we're just going to attack into their set monster. It's a Spy, so it seems like they're on a full Gravekeeper package here for the Perfect Circle Monarch stuff. And we're actually not going to Smashing this because they still do have a monster on field to tribute for if they go for like a Ryza or something. So I'd rather just clear the board with TT if they bring out a monster like that, and potentially save Smashing for later. They go for Heavy here, and I actually do think I have to Solemn this, because if they bring out a Ryza on top of this, then we don't really have a good way to clear it, right? We're drawing into Breaker next turn, and then we can Smashing the Spy, but the Ryza is protected, so we're in a pretty bad spot there. That's probably going to eat up over 4,000 of our life points anyways and put us in a worse spot overall, so I do think that it is better just to Solemn this here, and then save the TT for that. So they go for Ryza, try to spin back our back row, but we do have this TT here to blow up the board. And now we just got a Smashing and a Dream. I mean, Din Fizz is not bad. We can set that up, pass back to them. We could have also set the Smashing potentially just to sort of like bluff our opponent a bit because their Heavy is gone. But if they summon out like a Breaker or something, I don't want them to break our back row and leave the Fissure up. So I doubt they do that. They probably would break the Fissure, but like still, I don't want to take that chance. MST, I am okay setting. I'm fine setting MST here because if they break that, you know, that's okay. And this does deal with if they set like Phoenix Wind Blast or something like that. So they're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw into a Cyber Dragon. Pretty good draw here. We can special that out and then attack over their set monster. It is a Gravekeeper Spy. So they don't have any Gravekeepers left. That is good information for us that they just have the triple Spy and one guard there. So they could side in more, but I think that it only makes sense to bring out those. They're going to bring out a Sidra here and attack into our Sidra, so that will go through. Both those will be banished, and they'll pass back to us. Shrink is a card that we can potentially use here. We're just going to set it because, again, Heavy's gone. So, you know, we're fine setting that there. They're going to go for Premat, target the Disc Commander, but we do have the MST for that. They're going to go for D-Draw, pitching that Mally that they've had in hand for quite some time. And unfortunately, it will be banished, so they won't get the value off that, but they can set one, pass back to us. We draw Rhoda, which is pretty good. We can go for Rhoda for Survivor here, and that should probably be enough to wrap up the game. So we're going to go for Survivor, attack in for 18, and then we're just going to pass back to our opponent. And if they manage to clear Survivor somehow, we have Smashing to then deal with whatever monster they still have on field. So I feel like that's pretty good, and it is indeed good enough to win us that game. So we're going to go into game 2. I think I bring in another Knock here. And I might take out the Vortex, but I definitely keep in the Dust Shoot here. Dust Shoot's a card that sometimes you take out going second, but like against Monarchs, I think we do want it in the deck because they likely will have 4 or more cards in hand a fair amount of the time. They're going to go for Dust Shoot on us, speaking of Dust Shoot, and they're going to get to rip a card out of hand here. They're going to get rid of the Sidra, which I think makes a lot of sense because you can get over whatever they probably have, and DD Worley can clean up the other one. But if they spin back DD Worley, that's also fine, but we can then E-Call to get a different monster that we can summon out instead and get more aggressive here. So I feel like we got a pretty good hand. We're going to go for E-Call for Stratos here. Just because, like, Warrior Lady into their set is, like, fine, but I feel like with 2 back row there, it probably won't go through. So I'd rather just get some value off the Stratos now, search out a Wild Heart for later, and then potentially do stuff with that. We're going to activate a Dim Fizz, and then try and attack in to their set monster here, just in case it does go through. It probably won't, but if it does, then this is pretty good. And they're going to chain to D-Fisher a Crush Card Virus, and that actually is pretty devastating for us. And the reason for this is because Wild Heart is not unaffected by traps in hand. So, normally if Wild Heart was on the field and Crush Card was activated, then, it would not be destroyed by Crush Card. But because it's in the hand, it will indeed be destroyed here. So we will lose all of our monsters here, and that's going to be kind of rough. So we just have a Solemn and an MST to set here. If they've got heavy, they've got heavy. I feel like we're kind of cooked there, and we probably have to Solemn the heavy either way, because Dimf is the only thing preventing them from potentially doing things here, and Crush Card preventing us from doing a lot of things as well. So we kind of need to just, play a game of preventing the other from doing something, which not everyone likes that sort of game, but it is sometimes what happens when you've got Crush Card running around. So we draw into a Shrink, and we also draw into a TT. We don't set either of these because our opponent will know or have a very good inkling of whichever one it is. I think next turn we probably want to go for that. Next turn we'll also be out of Crush Card Virus, but I actually forget this at the moment. So I do reveal it to Fisher. Normally what would happen is we draw, they wouldn't know the information, and then we'd set a TT here. They could have a really good read that it's TT, but there is still that little bit of doubt in the back of their head. Because there's that one unknown piece of information here. So normally setting the TT here would be a much better move than it is here. But I do think it is still good to set the TT just as another form of defense. I mean, maybe not. Maybe you want to save that for later. But I think it is good just in case they do manage to get aggressive. We do have Fisher to deal with whatever monster they have in case they do heavy our board. We might even solve the heavy if they go for heavy here, just because we've got so many back row here. We're losing out so much. But I think TT is relatively good defense. We're not drawing any monsters anytime soon. So, but yeah, if we had drawn Unknown there, I think we would have set TT. So I'm just going to go with that move either way, see how it works out for us. We draw Banisher, which is pretty good. We finally get a monster that we can use to attack in here. There are arguments for not summoning Banisher because they could have a Sidra. But we can just set this Shrink, and then if they do go Sidra, then we do have a way to deal with it. So they do special summon out of Sidra indeed, and now we can potentially shrink that in the damage step, and they are going to go for the attack. We are going to shrink it, and then the Banisher survives. Shrink will also get banished here because Banisher banishes everything, not just monsters. They're going to go for another Sidra from hand, so that makes sense because they did know that we had the Shrink there. But we do have Fisher to deal with the Sidra, so we can just do that after summoning ATT Assailant here. If they got TT, we're probably going to Solemn this because it's just good to get hit for 3,300, and we are indeed going to Solemn that. And now we can Fisher their monster. We're going to MST their back row just in case first. I don't think I had to do this. But I guess I'm just playing around if it's like Mirror Force or something, or just something to deal with Fisher. But like Econ would be bad if it's Econ because they could tribute the Sidra in response to the Fisher and then take control of one of our monsters to shut off our aggressive push here. They could still do that, but then we don't use up the Fisher. So I just go for it preemptively anyways, and then I go for the Fisher on the Sidra. So let me get in for 3,300 here. And I'm just going to set a Dark Bribe and pass back to them. So I feel like we're in a really good spot overall. They're going to think about this a bit and go for a Soul Exchange here. Now I make a crucial misplay. 2 Siders are gone, so it's very unlikely for them to actually be able to set up a Monarch this turn without the Soul Exchange. And Dark Bribe cannot be used on the summon of a Monarch. It has to be used on a spell or trap. So I think what I should do here is actually go for the Dark Bribe. It does give them a new card, but with Dimfizz on field, they can't really do too much here overall. And the fact that they're resorting to the Soul Exchange means that they do have Monarchs in hand, so that is restricting their options even further. And so it is just good, I think, to Dark Bribe this and leave this board on field. But as is, I do not do that. I mean, let's check their hand, see what they would have done in response to that. They probably would have gone like D-draw, pitch, Disc Commander, just try and get the draws, even though Disc Commander will be banished. And that could have given them even more options here. So who knows what this would have turned into. But as is, I think it definitely would have been good to Dark Bribe the Soul Exchange. It would have prevented them from being able to spin back something with the Ryza here, and would have been a lot better for us here. So we decide to TT this as well because I do feel like, we don't have a way to clear Ryza at present. I think in hindsight, this was also a mistake because, we want to keep some form of banishing up on field right now. And they're getting rid of our Dimfizz here. So the fact that they're targeting our Dimfizz means, 1, we're drawing into a dead card, but 2, we do lose one of our things that are banishing everything. And they are playing a deck that relies on getting things engraved. So I actually think that playing the TT here is awkward, even though we don't have a way to deal with Ryza on field for the next couple turns. We are going to be able to get more draws in the future, right? Because they can't attack this turn. So next turn, we activate the Dimfizz. And if they summon another Ryza there, then we could go for TT and blow up the Ryza. But, you know, right now, I feel like it's not really worth it to TT this. Although I do get why I did it at the time. I think it is ultimately a bad move for us. But they're going to set, and they realize that they forgot to go for a D-draw here. So I'm going to allow it, you know, in a tournament play or something like that. You know, you don't have to necessarily allow this thing. They did, you know, it's like in chess. They took their hand off the piece. They passed turn, but I'm okay with this. No new information was given throughout. So yeah, they're going to go for that. I'm not going to dark bribe a D-draw because then they still get a draw off that. So I feel like it's not really worth it to do that. And then we're going to go for a Dim Fizz here, pass back to them. But, you know, Dim Fizz is back online. They might not have a monster to do anything with here, so maybe we get lucky. Unfortunately, they do have a Survivor. Survivor is a very cool tech that I mentioned before in the last game to bring in against this style deck, and Survivor is going to go pretty hard here. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw into another Dim Fizz, which we will set as a bluff. They go for a Dust Tornado on that set, getting rid of that. And we're going to pass back to them. They go for a Ryza here, and that will indeed be the end of the game. So we're going to go into the next game, game 3. Again, I think I probably could have potentially, I maybe even won that one if I dark bribed the Soul Exchange, but it is definitely a bit of a toss-up because, again, they did have D-draw, so they would have been able to draw 2 more, but it definitely would have been better to dark bribe the Soul Exchange there no matter what. Either way, we've got a pretty straightforward hand. We can just go Stratos, search out a Alias because we have the Wild Heart already, and then set a Dust and a Solemn. There's arguments instead of setting the Solemn for setting the MST instead, because one, Solemn is better for us overall. I think this against this deck, it's more powerful at shutting off what our opponent can do, and we're going to use Dust Shoot here no matter what. So if they do have like MST or something, they can snipe the Solemn Judgment because it might work out for them where they want to do that, and that is a much more valuable thing to lose than the MST in hand. Also, in addition, if they got like Crush Guard Virus here and they've got a way to set that up that we can't necessarily Dust Shoot back, then we want the MST in end phase to hit the Crush Guard Virus. But I also think this play is fine too, because Solemn can shut off a lot of different things. So if they do have something to do here that is disastrous for us and we know the hand exactly from Dust Shoot, then we can potentially cut off that point of interaction and get really aggressive here to win the game. But I think in hindsight, maybe the MST would have been a bit better, but we're going to go for Dust Shoot here either way, get a peek at their hand, and see that they've got a Spy, a Dragon, a Reaper, a D-Draw, a Premat, and a Dust. So this is actually really good for us. We can just send back the Sidra, and then we can use Knock on whatever they set next turn. So I feel very good about this overall. However, again, it does make the, Solemn a bit more awkward. Because, if they'd set like a Dust Tornado, we could have potentially MST'd that. Now, we probably don't want to MST that because we probably want to save the MST for the pre-mat. But, if we don't give them anything engraved that they can pre-mat, then, we don't need to worry about that. So we go for Knock here, hit a Spy, and we are pretty happy about that overall. We're just going to get aggressive with this Alias because we know the back row is either a Dust Shoot, or not a Dust Shoot, a Dust Tornado, or a pre-mat here. We can get in for 3,700. And the main 2 set 2, so they don't have an easy Dust Tornado hit here. And I feel like this is pretty good either way, no matter what they've Dust Tornado. If they hit MST, that's a bit unfortunate, but like, again, we're keeping them off Monster Engrave for pre-mat, and if they hit Bottomless, that's unfortunate, but then we have the MST for the pre-mat, so we can potentially keep them off that, if we like saw a Monarch that they bring out over the Reaper. But they're going to set one pass back to us. We draw Dim Fizz here, so we're just going to go for that just in case they drew into something else that they want to set instead of the Reaper. And then we're going to attack in with the Stratos, because again, I feel like there isn't really much that Alias can get over that Stratos can't. That would actually come up here. But there is actually one card that could do that, which we might see in a later replay here. But I think this is ultimately okay. They've got a Cypher Soldier set, though, so that's going to be pretty good against our deck. Just getting in for a lot of damage here. And we don't really mind too much, given that we got Solemn set, so we don't care right now before the Solemn activation. But after the Solemn activation, that Cypher Soldier could get a bit nasty for us here. So they are going to go for Dust Tornado on the Dim Fizz, and I think that makes sense just to get it out of the way, so that way they can get these Cypher Soldier engraved potentially for their Monarch play. They're going to go for a Jinzo here, which we do have to Solemn because we don't really have enough points of interaction outside of our traps. They go for Premat here on the Jinzo. We've got MST for that, and yeah, that'll just be the end of the game because we know the other cards exactly, I believe. It's Reaper and D-Draw, yeah, so they can't use either of those, and the MST deals with that perfectly. So we get in for 3,700 next turn, and that's the end of the game. We actually got one more game with this deck, so let's dive into that one now. Same matchup here. We just went straight into a replay. But I think that this is a really, really fun matchup. I mean, those games were super intense, so we wanted to play another one here. So our opponent's going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw knock. So, we are very happy with that. We can just bring out a wild heart here, then go for a knock, deal with that set, get out those spies from their deck. We don't have to worry about that. They only banished 1, so this does mean that they probably have another in hand, but we got Smasher to deal with that. Unfortunately, they can bring out like a guard, which would be rough. But they're just going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw Reinforcing the Army, which honestly, I could go for Rhoda here for Exiled Force to deal with the set, which is very likely to be a Gravekeeper Spy. But I also do have Smashing Ground to deal with one of their monsters there, and I've got Book to deal with it. They summon out a Monarch, and I can get over it that way. So I feel like it is fine just to attack into the Spy and then save the Reinforcing the Army for later. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to attack him with a Wild Heart here. If it is Spy, I don't care about losing 400 additional damage. And I'd rather just get over this thing and deal more damage to them if it is something weaker. But it is indeed the Spy, and they're going to bring out that guard. So we don't need to use Smashing Ground yet. We can just wait for them to go for a play here and see what they do. They're going to go for a Card Trooper here, milling 3, milling a Mally as well. That is a bit unfortunate for us because they can do Mally plays in the future, which, I mean, it's always rough against a Monarch deck when they get Mally in the graveyard and set up ready to go. Our only hope is that they drew into a second Mally there. But they're going to attack over our Alias, which is going to be a bit unfortunate for us. We're going to go for a Rhoda for Force just to cut them off of all their tribute fodder here. We're going to go for the Force, target that guard, and then we're going to smashing the Spy there. The reason we go for it in this order is because if they book down the Spy, that's a lot better for us than if they book down the guard, and book is a way to deal with Smashing Ground. So I feel like it is better just to go for the guard first with the Force, and then go for the Smashing Ground there to deal with the Spy. We're going to attack in for 1,500 and pass back to them. And they're going to think about this a bit, go for a pre-mat here, and they're going to target the Trooper. We're going to let that go through because we don't really have a good way to stop it. I mean, Solemn is not worth using on that Trooper. They're going to mill 3 more, and they're going to attack over our Wild Heart. Now, we could book down the Trooper, but I don't necessarily want to do that because Trooper actually represents an opportunity for us to get in for a fair bit of damage with this Breaker. So I'd rather just go for that. Yes, they do get a draw off that. But I think with 4,200 life points to their name, it is better just for us to get aggressive here and try and deal with, what they've got before they can actually set up something that can deal with what we've got. We draw into Warrior Lady, which actually gives us another way to deal with the Trooper if we want to. We could summon out Warrior Lady, banish the Trooper, but I'd rather just go for the Breaker here instead to potentially break that back row. And we do hit a TT, so I'm glad I went for the Breaker ultimately here. And we're going to attack into that Trooper to deal 12. I'm not actually sure why they didn't TT there when we summoned out Breaker. They probably have a reason to. But I feel like it's generally a good trade just to go for the TT there. Maybe they thought we would have broken the pre-mat, which is a reasonable assumption to make. But I do feel like it's fine to go for TT there because that is a better card for us, I think, to break than the pre-mat. But they're going to go for heavy here. I do ultimately decide to solemn this. I accidentally revealed the Book of Moon there, but the reason I do this is because if they tribute over the set for Ryza, we don't really have the best way to deal with that. Yes, we have Warrior Lady, but we're giving them the initiative here. So I do feel like it's a bit awkward here to let our entire back row be demolished and then let them bring out a Monarch. But they're just going to bring out a Stratos instead, search out a Fearmonger here to potentially get back that Disc Commander, and then they're going to attack over our Breaker here. We are just going to book down that Stratos, 1, because they already know about it because we misclicked, and 2, because, I do think it's good just for us to get over that Stratos next turn, and we got Warrior Lady here to deal with their set as well. So we're going to go for a Dust Shoot as well. We're going to set that preemptively just in case the set is Morphing Jar. I don't think it is, but it could be. And then we're going to attack into the Sangam. We do have an option here to banish the Sangam, prevent them from getting a search, but since we have Dust Shoot online, I feel like it probably is okay to let them search with the Sangam, and we can save the Dust Shoot for a side or a bit of extension that could get them into something that could bring on a Monarch. And then we also know what's in their hands, so we can play around that a bit more in the future and save the Warrior Lady for if they set a monster here that we can't deal with otherwise, to sort of wall up. For instance, like a Reaper or something, we're fine with them searching out because we can just hit over it with the Warrior Lady and then get in for potential lethal if we draw another monster here. So I feel like having the Dust Shoot as backup lets us just not go for the banish there. I think it is ultimately fine. So we're going to Dust Shoot them, get a peek at what they're working with here. See, they've got a D-Draw, a Mally, a Soul Exchange, a Ryza, a Fearmonger, a Warrior Lady, and a Phoenix Wing. So, the Mally was in hand, so I feel, very good about that. I figured it was probably in hand by this point, given that they hadn't gone for a Mally play so far. But, yeah, we're not spinning that back. I think the move here probably is to spin back the Ryza, which they can use Soul Exchange to summon out Ryza and just set us back a turn. We can't really shut off D-Draw no matter what we send back, so it is just better to send the Ryza, I think, here. So that is what we are going to do. And I feel pretty good about this overall. Like, they do have a couple annoying options for us. One is, going for D-Draw, pitching the Mally, drawing 2. That's been unfortunate for us, of course, because they get 2 more cards. And then they're going to set 3, pass back to us. We draw Heavy Storm, which is a pretty good top deck there. We can go for Heavy. If they chain Phoenix Wing, I'm ultimately okay with that trade. And they're going to go for Phoenix Wing indeed, spinning back the Warrior Lady. But they pitch a Crow and they lose a Mirror Force. We still have perfect knowledge here. We know that they've got a DD Warrior Lady. We know they've got a Fearmonger. We know that they have a Soul Exchange. So I still feel like this is a pretty good situation for us overall. No need to attack in the set. If it's Warrior Lady, it walls up against the Breaker. If it is Fearmonger, then they get back Disc Commander, get 2 more draws. So really no point to going for that. And they're going to tribute over that Warrior Lady for a Ryza. So now we know exactly what's in hand still. We know that they've got a Soul Exchange, and we know that they've got a Fearmonger. They're going to attack him for 2,400. We draw Breaker, which they do know about, but we have to set the Breaker here because based on what they have right now, they basically have to go for the Ryza over the Breaker and then attack him for Fearmonger next turn. So we're not dead. We are very likely going to lose this game, but we're not dead yet. So we have to take any opportunity that we can to potentially win. But unfortunately, they draw into another Ryza, which will indeed be the end of the game. So we're going to go into the game 2 here, and let's see how we do. We're going first, so that's always a good thing against this style of deck. If we draw into Dushu early, that's very nice, but Dushu is now limited, thank goodness, but it does make it harder for us to draw it in the opener. We're going to go for Stratos here, search out a alias because we have the Wild Heart. And then we're going to set the Mirror Force there, pass back to them. If they've got Breaker or MST or something like that, we're ultimately okay with that. I think this is still a good play to do. They're going to go for Stratos and search out a Disc Commander here and get that online while we don't have like Dim Fizz or stuff up. I think that makes sense. And we're just going to let the Stratos crash in here. We could have gone for Mirror Force, but I don't really think it's the best option, especially given that we have plenty of other monsters in hand. So we can just go for those next turn. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw into a Fisher here. We're going to go for a Wild Heart, attack in for 1,500. Just get in for that and prevent them from using that back row on it. So they're going to think about this a bit, and they're going to set 1, pass back to us. We've got this knock, so that's very nice for us. We can go for the knock and get rid of their set. So we are going to do that. We go for knock before the summon that we make here, and that may seem weird, but the reason I do that is because if we summon out like Alias, and they go knock, and they get that Disc Commander engrave, or they get Sangan engrave, or something like that, then I'd rather have... I don't like that trade, right? Whereas, if I go knock first and they use up TT here, I do lose a monster, but I do think it's better just to prevent them from doing anything there. And I still have the Wild Heart, so TT is just a 1-for-1 trade here. So they're going to banish those spies out of their deck. We bring in an Alias to attack in for a ton of damage here, getting in for 3,400 total. And then we'll set this Book of Moon, pass back to them, give us another layer of protection. They're going to go for Dust on that new set, hitting the book. And I'm happy about that because that means that they might not think that this Mirror Force is good enough to use spell and trap removal on, or they might think it's chainable in some way. So I feel pretty good about this because that can protect our board pretty well. They're going to go for D-Draw, pitch that Disc Commander here, go for a DD Survivor, try and attack over our Wild Heart. And, while we do still have lethal with the Breaker next turn and Fisher, I do think it is just better to go for the Mirror Force here. Because, if they've got a trap here, we want the Wild Heart to stick around. So, I think this gives us more value than doing that other play. And I don't want to play into TT here. I mean, TT, we still get in for 15, but I might as well get in for lethal now. And then I can always summon something in main 2. And it looks like they did have the TT set, so I'm very glad I did this play. And we actually managed to win the game there because we did have lethal on board. Now for the all-important game 3. So both these games have gone to game 3. They've been very, very intense. Will we be able to pull this one out, or will the Perfect Circle Monarch game be able to take a match on us? This is a really good draw. We go for Dim Fizz first, just in case they've got something like Crush Card or something to chain for the knock. They'll probably chain Crush Card to the activation of the Dim Fizz, but they did not do that, so we are fine just summoning out a Banisher and then going for a knock here. So they do unfortunately have Crush Card for that, so they will be able to get rid of our Banisher and know our entire hand. So yeah, that was rough. But at least the Garden's banished, so it's one less card they can bring back from grave. So I'm ultimately glad that I went for the Dim Fizz there. And if they had chained the Crush card to the Dim Fizz, then we would have been able to keep this knock in hand for their other cards. But as is, I don't really feel like setting the Bottomless because they'll know it's Bottomless. And also, Heavy Storm would be really devastating for us here. So You don't really feel like going for that. They're going to go for Roto, though, get out of Stratos, and Dust Tornado are Fisher, go for D-Draw, pitching that Mally. I mean, this is really just the perfect outcome for them. This is really, really rough for us. They're going to attack in for 18. We do have Fisher to deal with that, Stratos next turn, but it's not looking the best. We draw Solemn, though. That's a pretty good draw overall, letting us shut down what they potentially do in the future. We go for Fisher, set the Bottomless and the Judgment now. They know what these cards are exactly, but they're going to know what they are exactly next turn as well. So, like, I think it's fine just going for this now. And if they've got heavy, they've got heavy. We can solve that potentially because we kind of need the Bottomless to stick around. But ultimately, it is what it is. So it's Sidra, and that will actually stay engraved there. Do the Crush card. And, you know, based on what we got, I think we got to go for Exiled. Yes, they know about Exiled. So, like, are they going to set something in Exiled that, you know, is going to be high value for them? Probably not. But, like, they could know that we know that they know that we've got Exiled. And, you know, they could just set a spy here saying, like, oh, they're not going to summon out the Exiled because they know that we know about the Exiled. And there's a bunch of mind games that can go on here. I think in a deck like this, especially, you kind of just have to use up the removal that you have while you have it. And so I'm just going to go Exiled here. This also does keep them off of a Monarch summon. So I feel like it ultimately is fine just to go for. And we hit a Legendary Jiu-Jitsu Master, which is the monster that I mentioned in earlier in the video, where Alias can get over that, but Strauss cannot. So it probably is better to attack in with Alias here overall. But it just wasn't on my mind in previous games. And luckily it didn't come back to bite us. But it is something that could happen. There's the Spy. So they're going to flip that Spy, bring out a Spy in defense, because now we've got an unknown back row here. So they're going to summon out a Ryza. And they're going to target our new set because they know that one of our old set is Bottomless, and they hit the Bottomless. That's going to be a bit unfortunate for them. Luckily for us, our new set is Bottomless, so we can actually get rid of that Ryza and, you know, not spin back anything to the top for us. We are actually just going to pass, keeping the Survivor in hand. We can't really get over the Spy, so no point in summing out the Survivor, giving them a Ryza target that will spin that back to the top of our deck. So I'm fine just leaving it like this. And if they do decide to just switch the Spy to attack and get aggressive here, we can summon out the Survivor and beat over the Spy. So I feel ultimately pretty good about this. They're going to go for a Mally here. Get another Mally from deck, tribute that for a Ryza, and they're going to target our other Bottomless. So we got lucky there. They got a bit unlucky. If they targeted the Solemn, it would have set us back a turn, which would have been unfortunate. But with that Bottomless there, we are able to just draw a new card here, so that's very nice. They do know that the Solemn is the last set, though. We're going to set a Assailant here. They've gone through double Ryza, so if they've got another Ryza to spin back our Assailant, that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. We can also Solemn that Ryza, but I don't really think that's worth it. It might be, though, because we do have 3,500 damage on board here once we summon the Survivor next turn, so there's the argument to do that, but I'm just going to sit on that Assailant, pass back to them. We draw a Dark Bribe, so another counter trap is always a good thing. And we're just going to pass back to them. They're going to set one, go for Dust Tornado on the Dark Bribe. We're okay with that being gone. And then they go for a Sidra here. Now, we could potentially Solemn the Sidra if we wish, but I decide not to here because it's just getting banished with the Assailant here anyways. So I feel like it is good just to trade that there. We draw E-Call, which is very nice here. We can go for Stratos to then get a search here and just get more monsters out of our deck, give us more protection later on. So I go for the Stratos, try and get a search here, get the Alias there. And now I can use that as another beater next turn if I so wish. I attack into the set, which is a Spy. They have no targets left in deck to bring out. The Spies are gone. The Guard is banished. So I feel very good about that. So we do take 200 from that, and they do have a tribute here. But we could potentially Solemn the tribute depending on what it is. And they've gone through 2 Rises, so I'm not sure how many of those they have left. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw Dim Fizz, which is really good with our Survivor here. So I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to summon out the Survivor after going for the Dim Fizz there. And then I'm going to try an attack over their set card. It is a Disc Commander, so glad to get that banished instead of in the grave, cutting them off of some draws later. And they go for a Survivor here. I could potentially Solemn this, because if you Solemn Survivor, it does not hit the field, and it actually won't be able to come back in the end phase due to that. So I could potentially go for that. Ultimately, I decided not to, and in the moment, it's because I forget that Survivor only has to be on field, and so Solemn will actually cut off it from, you know, being able to come back. But I think in hindsight, it also does make sense. I think Solemn is better to use on more high impact targets, and with our own Survivor, basically we can blank that Survivor every turn. If we want to attack in, we need to attack our Survivor into their Survivor, clear that, and then get in with our other monsters. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to let the Survivor be in the picture and keep coming back. It is, of course, unfortunate if they get into other Monarchs here. But again, they've gone through 2 Ryza, which is the scariest of the Monarchs. So if they draw the 3rd Ryza, they draw the 3rd Ryza, and they can spin back something that's unfortunate. Could also Solemn that 3rd Ryza. But I think overall, it is fine just to leave the survivor in the picture and save the solemn for something a bit more important. But we draw into Cyber Dragon, so that actually does give us a way forward here. We can crash our survivor into their survivor, and then we can bring back this Sidra in main 2 to get over the spy next turn. So in the end phase here, we do bring back our survivor, and this is a bit awkward because we have to bring back our survivor first. Technically, you don't have to. You can pass priority to your opponent there and be like, okay, I'm not going to bring back my survivor yet. Do you want to bring back your survivor first? And they could say yes, but I really feel like it's probably the most likely thing that they say no and just pass back to you. And because survivor is mandatory, you do have to do it. So then you would be forced to bring it back first. So we see that ruling in action there. And, you know, we learn something new every day because we actually didn't know that was how it worked, but that is indeed how it worked. So if that ever comes up for you, then that is how it happens. So we bring back the survivor here and they go for TT because if survivor is banished twice in a turn, it will actually not return to the field. So that's an important thing to know as well. And I think because we are losing both our dragon and our survivor and putting them in a spot where they have survivor still online, I'm just going to solemn that, keeping around our board. So there are debates about whether we should have done that, but I feel like it is better just to keep this board around, even though we do drop down a fair amount of life points. So they're going to think about this a bit, and they're going to go for an interesting play here. They're going to go for a Fearmonger, then call the Haunted back. That's Stratos to pop our Dim Fizz. This does shut off their own survivor, but it shuts off our survivor more importantly. And so they'll be able to clear that and then pass back to us. It still puts us in a pretty fine spot. We can go for Alias here. We can attack over the Spy with the Sidra, and then we can attack over the Survivor with the Alias. And then main 2, we can just set this Solemn pass back to them. So we don't know the last card in hand. If it's a Monarch, it's a Monarch, but we can solemn that, so we feel fine about that. They're going to set 1 and set another, pass back to us. We draw Dim Fizz, which is perfect here. We can go for the Dim Fizz and attack over that Fearmonger with the Alias, banish that. They do have Mirror Force, but we've got Solemn, which is a very, very key Solemn that we have to do here because Mirror Force basically puts a wrench into all of our plans. So we're probably going to be losing more life points there than 1,500 if we let the Mirror Force go through. So we do Solemn that, and we are able to attack over the Cypher Shoulder with the Sidra. So this worked out pretty well for us overall. We can pass back to them. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. We know that they don't have TT. We know that they don't have Mirror Force. So we can go for a breaker here and then just get in for 38 plus 21 and then break that back row in the main phase 2. I also could not break it here, but I figured there's not really a reason to leave it around, especially if it's like Phoenix Wind Blast, which we don't want to give them the option to use if they draw a card here. Not that they would, because that would still be lethal for them probably, but it's an MST, so they are able to deal with our Dim Fizz there. And they're just going to admit defeat because the last card in hand is a Jinzo, so they're not able to do anything there. And we actually were able to come back from this one despite a very, very powerful start from our opponent with Crush Card and Stratos and D-Draw and a ton of stuff like that. We still were able to grind our way out to victory. So I really like this deck. I think it's really, really cool. Alpha 2 has cooked again. And I think this deck is actually really, really good against a lot of decks in the metagame. As I mentioned in the beginning, not just against this deck, but also against zombies and against any graveyard-focused deck in the format. And a lot of decks are graveyard-focused in this format. So I think this deck is very, very good. You know, maybe it's not anti-meta, but maybe it's just meta, even though it does have anti-meta tendencies. So I like this deck a lot. I'm curious to see what other people do with it. Let me know down in the comments below what you would do with this deck. Would you play more Survivors? Would you add in Macro Cosmos? What would you do? Let me know down in the comments below. I look forward to discussing with y'all as always. And if you want to play game in this format or the format that I mentioned on the channel, then head on over to the YGF from Zero Discord server. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff to help boost our engagement and grow the community even further. And as always, big shout outs to my patrons, Rinswin, Pork Chop, Brent Knocker, Tyler Compton, GeoMyFest, Dump Truck, Scout Zero. It means a lot that y'all support me this way and encourage me to make more videos like this one in the future. And that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed as always. Until next time, I've been Ben from YGF from Zero. I'm signing off.